All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into the Kybalion.
Oh, very cool.
It's a text that's been kind of shrouded in mystery for centuries.
Yeah.
And we're working with excerpts from this PDF,
Okay.
simply titled the Kybalion-PDF compress.pdf.
Right.
And your interest in it really piqued my interest as well because
It's fascinating stuff.
it's some pretty profound stuff. So
Yeah. It claims to contain the essence of Hermetic philosophy,
right.
which is ideas that originated in ancient Egypt and Greece,
Okay.
but have resonated across cultures and time periods.
So let's start right at the source then.
Okay.
The Kybalion keeps pointing back to this mysterious figure,
Right.
Hermes Trismegistus,
Oh, yeah.
and calls him the master of masters.
Mhm.
It's like he's the OG philosopher, maybe even predating Abraham.
Right.
But was he even a real person?
That's the big question,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Historians still debate
Yeah.
whether Hermes Trismegistus was an actual person or more of a symbolic figurehead
Okay.
that represents a long lineage of kind of wisdom keepers.
Okay.
But either way, the impact of the teachings
Yeah.
attributed to him is undeniable.
Yeah, for sure. It's
Uh,
like we're dealing with a philosophical legend here.
For sure.
And speaking of secrets, the Kybalion itself was passed down orally for centuries,
Right.
veiled in symbolism and allegory, like a secret code.
Yeah, for sure.
Why all the secrecy?
Well, the Hermetists believed that this potent knowledge
Yeah.
could be dangerous
Yeah.
if it fell into the wrong hands or it was misunderstood.
Right.
Imagine someone manipulating the fabric of reality
Yeah.
without proper understanding.
Yeah.
There could be chaos.
Right.
So the veiled language and symbolism
Yeah.
acted as safeguards
Right.
to make sure the teachings were only revealed
Yeah.
to those who were ready.
It's like a test.
You
have to decode it
Yeah.
to prove your words. So what makes this knowledge so powerful?
Well, at the core of the Hermetic philosophy are 7 principles
Okay.
that form the foundation
Right.
for understanding the universe and our place in it.
Okay.
They're kind of like universal laws
Right.
that govern everything,
Yeah.
from the movement of planets to our own thoughts and emotions.
Okay. I am so ready to unpack these principles.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one.
Okay.
Mentalism. What's
Yeah.
that all about?
So mentalism is this really interesting idea
Yeah.
that the all is mind, the universe is mental.
Okay.
It's basically saying that reality isn't physical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the projection of a vast, infinite living mind.
Okay.
The Kybalion calls this ultimate source the all.
So instead of the universe being this giant machine
Right.
made up of matter and energy,
Yeah,
it's more like a thought in the mind of a really, really big mind.
exactly.
Yeah.
Everything we perceive as the physical world, including ourselves,
Right.
is a mental creation within that universal mind.
Wow.
Yeah, think of it like this.
Oh.
You can create entire worlds
Mm-hmm.
in your own mind
Right.
with characters and landscapes and everything.
Yeah.
It all does the same thing,
Okay.
but on an infinitely grander scale.
That is wild.
Yeah.
It's like we're living in a shared dream.
Yeah, in a way.
But then how do we explain, like, stubbing our toe on a chair or
Right.
feeling the warmth of the sun? It
Right.
feels very real,
Yeah.
not like just someone's imagination.
Well, that's where the principle of correspondence comes in.
Okay.
It states, as above, so below, as below, so above.
All right.
This principle suggests that the same patterns and laws
Okay.
that govern the universe also operate
Yeah.
in our own lives and within our minds.
Okay.
It's like a fractal pattern,
Yeah.
repeating at different scales.
So the universe is like a giant blueprint,
Yeah,
and our lives are smaller versions,
exactly.
reflecting the same patterns.
By studying the microcosm, we can gain insight into the macrocosm.
Okay.
And by understanding those universal laws,
Yeah.
we can better understand ourselves.
Interesting.
This principle also implies that if we master our own inner world,
Yeah.
we might be able to influence the outer world.
Okay. That's pretty empowering.
Yeah.
Now, what about this principle of vibration?
Yeah.
It says nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates.
So this is where ancient wisdom meets modern science.
Okay.
Physics tells us that everything in the universe is in motion,
Right.
vibrating at different frequencies.
Yeah.
The difference between matter, energy, and even thoughts
Okay.
is just their rate of vibration.
Interesting.
It's like a symphony,
Okay.
with everything humming at its own unique frequency.
So a rock is just vibrating slower than, let's say, light or sound.
Exactly.
Right.
And this gets really interesting when you apply it to our thoughts and emotions.
Right.
Because the Kybalion suggests that our thoughts have vibrations too.
Yeah.
And that's how things like telepathy and mental influence might be possible.
Wait, you're saying our thoughts are like radio waves?
Yeah, that's the Hermetic
And
idea.
sending out signals.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by mastering vibration, we can control our mental and emotional states.
Wow.
And maybe influence the world around us.
That's some next level stuff.
It is.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
It makes you think about energy healing and all that.
Yeah.
It all kind of ties in.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into the next principle.
Okay.
Polarity.
Okay.
It states, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites.
So this highlights the duality in everything.
Okay.
It's saying that opposites aren't separate.
Mm-hmm.
They're two extremes of the same thing.
Okay.
For example, hot and cold are just different points on a spectrum of temperature.
Gotcha.
Light and darkness are varying degrees of light intensity.
So it's like a spectrum, like a sliding scale.
Exactly.
With two extremes and all the possibilities in between.
It applies to mental and emotional states, too.
Okay.
Love and hate, courage and fear, joy and sorrow.
Yeah.
They're all different degrees of the same energy.
You're blowing my mind here.
It's pretty wild, right?
Even our strongest emotions are just points on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And we can shift along that spectrum.
That's what Hermetic philosophy suggests.
Yeah, so we can transmute negative emotions into positive ones.
That's the idea.
Fear into courage.
Exactly.
Despair into hope.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to see how these principles are all interconnected.
They are.
They all build on each other,
Yeah.
creating this framework
Exactly.
for understanding everything.
They're not just separate ideas,
Right.
but pieces of a puzzle
Yeah.
that reveal a more complete picture of reality.
I'm hooked. What's the next piece?
All right, next up is the principle of rhythm,
Okay.
which states everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides.
Okay.
It suggests there's a swing between opposing forces in everything,
Okay.
like a pendulum.
So everything has its ups and downs, its cycles of growth and decay.
Yeah.
Like day and night, the seasons, even the stock market.
Yep, those are all good examples.
Right.
Even our emotional states, they ebb and flow.
Right.
We experience highs and lows.
Yep.
Joy followed by sadness.
Mm-hmm.
The key, according to the Kybalion, is to ride these waves without being swept away.
So it's like surfing, learning to ride the waves instead of being tossed around by them.
Understanding rhythm and its law of compensation
Okay.
allows us to neutralize the negative swings
Okay.
and keep a more balanced state.
I like that.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this law of compensation.
Okay, so the Kybalion says,
Yeah.
the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates.
Okay.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
So every swing in one direction is followed by an equal swing in the other.
Yeah, you could see it like karma. What goes around comes around.
Right.
But the Kybalion suggests it goes deeper than that.
Okay.
It affects our actions, our mental and emotional states.
So if we experience incredible joy, we're likely to experience sorrow at some point.
That's one way to look at it.
Okay.
But Hermetists believe that by mastering rhythm, we can lessen the impact of those negative swings.
So we can navigate those lows with more grace and resilience.
Exactly.
That's definitely a skill I'd like to develop.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, and rhythm.
We're on a roll.
What's next?
Next, we have the principle of cause and effect.
Okay.
It states, everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law, not recognized.
Okay.
So basically, it's debunking the idea of random events.
So there are no accidents.
Yeah.
Just consequences that we might not understand.
Exactly.
Okay.
Even something random like a coin toss is determined by a long chain of causes leading up to that moment. Everything is connected.
Okay.
Every action ripples outward.
But what about free will? If everything is predetermined by this chain of cause and effect, doesn't that mean we have no control?
Well, that's the question.
Right.
That's puzzled philosophers for ages.
Of course.
The Kybalion suggests that while we're subject to the laws of cause and effect, we can also become causers instead of just effects.
So we can break free from being puppets of fate?
Not completely break free, but maybe become more conscious participants in shaping our destinies.
I like that.
It's about understanding those deeper causes and using our will to influence the effects.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now we've got one final principle to explore.
Right.
Gender.
Okay.
What does that have to do with understanding the universe.
So it's important to clarify.
Yeah.
This isn't about biological sex.
Okay.
But a universal principle of creation that operates on all levels of existence, physical, mental, and spiritual.
Gotcha.
The Kybalion states, there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work.
Okay, so we're not talking about male and female in the traditional sense, but more like fundamental forces that drive creation.
Exactly. The Kybalion uses the analogy of electricity.
Okay.
The masculine principle is associated with the positive pole, which projects energy and initiates action.
Right.
And the feminine principle is associated with the negative pole, which is receptive, nurturing, and responsible for generation and creation.
So it's like a dance between these two forces.
Exactly.
One that initiates and the other that brings forth creation.
Yeah, and the Kybalion suggests that these principles are at play in everything.
Wow.
From the formation of atoms and molecules to the vast cosmic dance of galaxies.
Okay, we've covered all 7 Hermetic Principles.
You did it.
My head is spinning a little bit. How do all these pieces fit together to create this mental universe?
That's where we go deeper down the rabbit hole.
Okay.
And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I have a feeling this is where things get really interesting.
It does.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but after that last discussion, I feel like I've been staring into the Matrix.
Yeah, it definitely challenges how we see reality.
It's mind-blowing that everything we think is solid and real could actually be a projection of this universal mind.
Right, but remember, the Hermetists believed that understanding this mental universe was the key to personal power and spiritual evolution.
Okay, so let's dive back into that rabbit hole. The Kybalion keeps talking about this idea of the all in all.
Right.
What does that even mean?
So this emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything in the universe. The Kybalion states that the all, that infinite mind, is present within everything and everything is within the all.
Okay.
It's like each of us is a wave, unique and individual.
Right.
But inseparable from that vast ocean of consciousness.
So even though we experience ourselves as separate individuals, we're also all connected to this universal mind.
Exactly.
Like drops of water in the same cosmic ocean.
That's a great analogy. And this interconnectedness has huge implications, for how we understand ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah.
It suggests that our actions, our thoughts, even our emotions can ripple outwards and influence the larger whole.
That's a powerful thought. It makes you realize that we're not just isolated beings, but part of this larger web of existence.
And that web extends beyond just the physical plane, what we can perceive with our senses.
Okay.
The Kybalion introduces this concept of planes of correspondence to describe these different levels of existence, each with its own laws and phenomena.
So like different dimensions or realms of reality.
Exactly. The Kybalion outlines 3 major planes: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual.
Okay.
And each of these planes has subdivisions, so it creates this vast interconnected hierarchy of existence.
Whoa, so you're saying there could be beings or entities existing on other planes that we can't even perceive?
It's a possibility, right? Imagine a creature living in 2 dimensions trying to comprehend a 3-dimensional object.
Right.
It would be beyond their understanding.
Right.
The Kybalion suggests that there are beings on higher planes whose existence is beyond our comprehension.
Okay.
Just as an earthworm can't really grasp, the complexities of human society.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. But let's bring it back to something a little more graspable. The principle of vibration. You mentioned earlier that thoughts and emotions have their own vibrational frequencies. How does this play out across these different planes of existence?
That's a great question. The principle of vibration is really key to understanding how these planes interact. Remember, everything's in motion, vibrating different frequencies.
Right.
On the physical plane, this explains the difference between solids, liquids, and gases.
Okay.
But this principle extends to the mental and spiritual planes as well.
So you're saying that just like a rock vibrates at a slower frequency than light, a thought of anger vibrates at a different frequency than a thought of love.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. The Kybalion emphasizes the interconnectedness of everything, right? So if the universe is ultimately mental and thoughts have vibrations, then those vibrations can impact other levels of reality.
Okay, now I'm starting to see how those ancient mystics were onto something. It's like they were intuitively tapping into what quantum physics is now starting to reveal about the nature of reality.
Right.
It's not just woo-woo spirituality, there's actual science behind it.
Precisely. And this has huge implications for how we understand energy healing manifestation, even the power of prayer.
Yeah.
If thoughts are vibrational energy, then focusing our thoughts and intentions can actually influence outcomes on both the physical and mental planes.
This is seriously blowing my mind. Okay, so we've talked about how vibration relates to these different planes. What about polarity? How does that principle play out in a practical sense?
So the principle of polarity reminds us that everything has its opposite.
Right.
But those opposites are really just two extremes of the same thing.
Right.
This means we have the power to actually transmute negative states into positive ones.
Okay.
By consciously shifting our polarity.
So instead of trying to fight or suppress those negative thoughts and emotions, we can actually transform them into something positive.
That's the Hermetic idea.
Yeah.
The Kybalion uses the example of transmuting fear into courage.
Okay.
Fear and courage aren't separate things. They're just different degrees of the same energy.
Right.
By focusing our will and attention on courage, we can raise our vibration and diminish the fear.
It's like using that sliding scale we were talking about.
Exactly.
Instead of being stuck at the negative end, we can move the dial towards the positive.
Exactly. And this applies to all sorts of mental and emotional states.
Yeah.
You can transmute anger into peace, hatred into love, despair into hope.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the energy and learning to direct it consciously.
All right, that's a game changer. Now, how about rhythm? We talked about how everything has its cycles. What are some practical ways we can work with this principle in our daily lives?
So the principle of rhythm suggests that everything moves in cycles: activity and rest, growth and decay, expansion and contraction. We experience this in the natural world, in our bodies, even in our emotional lives. The key is learning to ride these waves without being swept away by them.
So it's about finding that balance and not getting too attached to either the highs or the lows.
You got it. The Kybalion suggests that by understanding the law of compensation, we can anticipate these swings and prepare for them rather than being caught off guard.
So if we're going through a period of good fortune, we should be mindful that a period of challenge might follow and vice versa.
Precisely. It's not about being pessimistic,
Right.
but about understanding the cyclical nature of life and developing a sense of equanimity so we're not thrown off balance when those shifts occur.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's talk about cause and effect. How does that play out on a personal level?
The principle of cause and effect reminds us that we're not just victims of circumstance. Every action we take, every thought we think, every choice we make has consequences.
So we're constantly creating our own reality, even if we're not aware of it.
Exactly. The Kybalion suggests that by understanding this principle, we can become more conscious creators of our own lives.
Okay.
Instead of just reacting to circumstances, we can start making choices that align with the outcomes we desire.
That's incredibly empowering. It means we have more responsibility than we often realize.
It does. But with that responsibility comes the incredible power to shape our own destiny. It's about recognizing our thoughts and actions as seeds that we plant in the garden of our lives.
I love that analogy. It makes it so clear. Okay, let's talk more about gender. We touched on this earlier, but how does this principle with its masculine and feminine energies apply to our mental and emotional lives?
So the Kybalion explains that these masculine and feminine principles are active within our minds as well. The I part of ourselves, the conscious will, is associated with that masculine principle.
Okay.
The me, the part of us that receives impressions and generates thoughts and feelings, is associated with the feminine principle.
So we each have both masculine and feminine energies within us, regardless of our biological sex.
Exactly. And it's the interplay of these energies that creates our mental and emotional experiences.
So is it about finding that balance between these two forces within ourselves?
That's an important part of it. But it's also about understanding how these principles operate so we can use them consciously and creatively. For example, we can use that masculine principle of will to direct our attention and focus our thoughts. And we can use the feminine principle of receptivity to access intuition and allow creative ideas to flow.
This is starting to sound like some advanced self-mastery techniques.
It is. The Kybalion suggests that by understanding these principles, we can become alchemists of our own minds.
Wow.
Transforming negativity into positivity and shaping our reality with more awareness and intention.
This is incredible. Okay, before we move on, can you talk a bit more about this idea of mental transmutation that the Kybalion mentions? It sounds like some kind of Jedi mind trick.
It's not magic, but it can feel that way.
Right.
Mental transmutation is the art of changing mental states by applying these Hermetic principles we've been discussing.
Okay.
It's about using our will, our understanding of these principles, and our focused attention to shift our vibration, transmute those unwanted thoughts and emotions, and ultimately shape our reality.
So it's like mental alchemy transforming lead into gold.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about taking the raw material of our thoughts and emotions and shaping them into something more positive, more aligned with what we want to experience.
Okay, so we've covered the 7 principles and how they relate to this idea of a mental universe. We've even touched on some pretty advanced techniques like mental transmutation. But how do we actually start putting all this wisdom into practice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what we'll delve into in the final part of our deep dive.
I can't wait to hear what practical advice this ancient wisdom has to offer for navigating the modern world. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Kybalion. You know, exploring these Hermetic principles has been like a total mind upgrade.
Yeah, it's really amazing how relevant these ancient ideas still feel today, isn't it?
It is. So as we wrap up our exploration, I'm curious to hear about those practical axioms, the kind of advice that we can actually apply in our everyday lives.
Well, one of the Kybalion's key messages is that knowledge without use and expression is a vain thing.
Okay.
It's not enough to just intellectually understand these principles.
Yeah.
We need to actively apply them if we want to see any real transformation.
It's like reading a cookbook and never actually cooking anything. You might have all the knowledge, but you're missing the experience.
Precisely. The Kybalion encourages us to be active participants in our own mental and spiritual growth. It's not about just contemplating these ideas.
Yeah.
It's about using them to actually transform ourselves and our lives.
Okay, I love that. It's a call to action. But where do we even begin? There's so much to unpack here.
Well, one of the most practical things I think in the text is about mastering our mental and emotional states.
Okay.
It cautions against getting lost in, like abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings.
Yeah.
Instead, it emphasizes grounding this wisdom in our everyday experience. True mastery, according to the Kybalion, is using the higher forces against the lower.
So it's not about escaping reality or getting lost in fantasies, but using this knowledge to navigate the real world with more skill and awareness.
Exactly. It's about learning to direct our will and our attention so we're not just constantly swept away by all the ups and downs of life.
Okay.
Imagine being able to choose your emotional responses instead of just reacting automatically.
That sounds incredibly freeing. But how do we actually do that?
Well, the Kybalion really stresses the power of mental discipline.
Yeah.
Training our mind like athletes train their bodies.
Right.
We can start by just becoming more aware of our thoughts and emotions. Noticing those habitual patterns, the negative self-talk, the knee-jerk reactions that create suffering.
Like hitting the pause button on autopilot and choosing a different response.
Exactly. And as we become more aware, we can start to use the Hermetic principles to actually shift those patterns. For example, if you notice yourself kind of spiraling into a negative thought loop,
Yeah.
you can use the principle of polarity to focus on the opposite.
Okay.
Instead of dwelling on fear, focus on courage. Instead of replaying past mistakes, visualize future successes.
This is starting to sound a lot like cognitive behavioral therapy and modern self-help techniques.
Isn't it interesting how those ancient ideas align with what modern psychology is finding?
It's like they had this user's manual for the mind, but it was hidden in this cryptic text that only a few people could understand.
Well, thankfully, that wisdom is much more accessible now. And as we wrap up, I want to encourage you and all our listeners to explore these teachings for yourself. The Kybalion is a book that you can read and reread and find new layers of meaning each time.
And you don't need any special qualifications or initiations to access this wisdom. It's available to anyone who's willing to understand and apply it.
Exactly. The real magic happens when we take these principles out of theory and experiment with them in our own lives.
So as a final thought for our listeners, if the universe is truly mental, what power do your thoughts have to shape your reality? What seeds are you planting in the garden of your mind?
Those are great questions to consider. The Kybalion invites us to explore the potential within each of us, to become conscious creators of our experience.
This has been an amazing journey, and I want to thank you for being such a fantastic guide through the world of Hermetic wisdom.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the journey of self-discovery never really ends. Keep exploring, keep experimenting, and never stop asking questions.
That's great advice. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Kybalion. We'll see you next time for another exploration into the realms of knowledge and wisdom.